From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Greetings.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a mysterious mystery that's been mystifying you, a cold case you can't get out of your head, why terry cloth is called terry cloth and not something more appropriate like, I don't know, rosemary cloth, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, your daring diva of deadly doings and downright dirty deeds, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Well, Producer Mark, terry cloth is named after a French man named Terry Beauvoir.
What?
Who invented... I'm just fucking making it up. I don't know. I just was trying to slam your ass down because that was the dumbest intro I've ever fucking heard.
I was thinking about that. Who's Terry? Why do they call it terry cloth?
That's why I went with that, because if we had to call it rosemary cloth, I would kill myself.
Yeah, that's
so
true. Maybe Scott cloth. No, that doesn't
That's
sound... That sounds like
toilet paper.
Yeah, no.
Dave cloth or Jeff cloth.
Jeff. We'll call it Jeff cloth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't we just stick with Terry?
All right.
It's worked for a long time. People don't like change. Let's just stick.
True.
I'm not a fan of the terry cloth. It's very hot.
Yeah, it can be hot, and if it's not laundered properly, it can be very rough.
Oh, okay. That's more than I really wanted to know about terry cloth. I don't.
Use those fabric softener things in the dryer, folks.
Yeah. Fabric softener sheet is very helpful with your terry cloth or your Dave cloth or whatever the F you call your sports cloth.
Right.
God, you're so weird. Oh, yeah. Jesus Christ. Okay, so speaking of being, completely and utterly pissed off at your spouse, this week's episode is so fresh and new, and it comes to us from Tipster Sharon, who is a gem of a human being. And when she sent it to me, I was like, "Oh, this is bullshit. This didn't happen." But it did. The arrest was just this Wednesday, and it's, like 3 months after the actual murder. And it's a juicy one, which comes into play later because the murdered man is a chef. See, juicy. See what I did there?
Clever.
See what I did there?
Yes.
So I guess we'll just start with the important details from KOIN TV. It's a CBS affiliate in Portland, Oregon. Could you hit the clip number 1, Producer Mark?
Many are grieving the loss of Daniel Brophy. Eileen Park has been talking with students who knew him, and they're just heartbroken. Eileen?
Yeah, he was found by students early Saturday morning in one of the school kitchens. Students tell me they're in disbelief.
This is how most people remember Daniel Brophy, a teacher, a chef, someone who cared about treating animals humanely. Dominique Boza says she wouldn't have graduated the Oregon Culinary Institute without his help.
He was really tough. He was really hard. He would call out some of the flaws that you had so you can correct them.
There was a big flood that came down here and it buried a bunch of things.
She shared with us this video of Brophy in his element.
Knowledge beyond belief. You think you come into culinary school like wide-eyed with like this dream of being a chef, and he realizes like you can do that, but there's a lot of things you need to know in between that.
So many students wanted to share with us what he meant to them. They emailed me picture after picture of the 63-year-old explaining how he single-handedly changed the way they look at food.
He was a friend to everybody out of the school, holding stuff on the weekends to help you learn more, taking students out mushroom foraging or showing you how to properly raise a chicken from start to finish.
Right now, Portland police detectives are looking for the person or people responsible.
There is a possibility that somebody has a surveillance system that we didn't see their camera, so we do ask if you do have surveillance and you haven't been contacted by police to give us a call.
It's a very interesting clip in hindsight, now that we can see 3 months down the line what happened. It's interesting that the police are asking for any sort of help because they were stumped as to who on earth would have wanted to take the life of the head instructor of the Oregon School of Culinary, or the Institute of Culinary Oregonians, or something like that. Because he had been there 12 years, he was beloved. Every student says the same thing. He was tough. He would correct you, but he wanted you to be the best chef you could be. He would take extra time outside of class. He would go with you, go foraging for mushrooms. What?
Yeah.
He was also apparently very skilled at marine biology and would help them dig up clams and scallops and stuff like that. He also had a list of Brophyisms, and they're almost on par with puns, which are my least favorite thing on earth, other than GIFs or GIFs. Those are my least favorite thing on earth. And then right after that is like puns right above that. And then right above puns are things like Daniel Brophy saying, you can eat any mushroom once. Stuff like that.
Very clever.
He seems like, kind of a cute, weird, interesting old dude. It's fascinating hearing. There are many videos of him talking online on social media, even from his students. And he is an interesting person, very dry sense of humor, very straight-faced and dry. His picture from his social media accounts is pretty funny. He's wearing a black chef's outfit and a little black chef hat, and he's kind of turned toward the camera like an old painting of George Washington, and he's holding a chicken in his arms.
Very nice.
It's really, and he's very straight-faced, and he looks very serious, but he's holding this chicken in his arms like it's, a child, or he seems like an interesting fellow.
He sure does.
So,
and he was shot, right?
He was shot. Thanks for that. So June 2nd, he was at work alone in one of the kitchens of the Culinary Institute of Oregon, and some staff and students found him. Now, he was still alive when they found him, so it had to have been just right after this happened. And they called authorities, but by the time they got there, he was already deceased. He had died at the Culinary Institute there in one of the kitchens. And no one could figure out who on earth would do this. Now, there were a lot of interesting theories, all sort of centered around perhaps an old student who's disgruntled. And I'm thinking to myself, I bet culinary school is expensive. And if I didn't like my instructor, I'm not sure I'd go back and kill him. I mean, I didn't have the best grades. And I mean, I was fine. I did fine in college. But like chemistry and biology things, I really was not good at that, but I had no interest in killing any of my professors.
I would have. I mean, that's why it's good I didn't go to college.
Sure.
Because they would have all, it would have been bad. And then I would have taken my own life, and because my brain would have just exploded.
Okay. Well, I think it's good to be self-realized. And
algebra, I can't do it.
Well, that was high school for me. I was, boy, oh boy, did I barely squeak by Algebra 1. Algebra 2, I thought I'm going to kill myself. But I would have killed myself, not any of a high school teacher. But, these are pretty much adults. It doesn't look like anyone's that young. There may be some people in their 20s, but I feel like if you want to invest the time and effort to go to culinary school, you're probably a little older. You're probably in your 30s. This is what you really want to do. You have found some sort of joy in cooking. And it seems like Daniel Brophy, was one of those people that would inspire that in you, that would foster the joy and the love of cooking. His wife says that the quote that was used quite often in their house is that life is a science experiment. Interesting.
That is interesting, isn't it?
Interesting. Yeah, kind of interesting. So, speaking of his wife, Nancy Crampton Brophy, she was arrested Wednesday, September 5th, a scant 3 months after her husband's murder.
Really?
Yeah, it's shocking. Now, he was shot. We don't know how many times. If it was once, and she's just really good at it. Her Facebook page is interesting in many ways. She has about 1,500 Facebook friends, which is pretty fascinating. She's a little older than Daniel. She's 68. He was 63. And, not to put too fine of a point on the external, Daniel was a handsome man. He, not like my kind of handsome, but I think a lot of people's kind of handsome. At 63, he was very fit. I'm always a little suspicious of chefs that are fit, because if I were a chef, you'd have to cut a hole. You have to have the fire department come and cut a hole through the house so I could get out.
Now.
I probably would be, but because it's a great thing I'm not a good cook, because I weigh even more than I do now, which is horrific. But so Daniel's fit, 63, but he looked substantially younger. He was losing his hair, and he didn't look vain. He didn't look like he'd had a face full of filler. He did have one of the things I'm not like real fond of, especially when men get older, is the some sort of Civil War facial hair situation going on, where I don't know if he did reenactments on the weekends, but kind of the longish handlebar mustache and the tiny little soul patch on the chin right underneath the bottom lip, like a chin vagina. A tiny little chin vagina.
There's a new term for you.
It's facial hair that is not,
It's a good description, and I can't stand it either.
Yeah.
It looks terrible on a man of any age, to tell you the truth.
I don't think it looks terrible. I just was like, it's just not one of my favorite things. But so he's kind of handsome. And Nancy,
What are you saying?
Well,
come on,
Nancy.
Go ahead.
68 going on 107.
Oh dear.
It kind of looks like she may have just given up on life, which makes me think, I'm not sure she was having an affair, if there was an affair. I'm just trying to find a motive here, because everything's been sealed. The search and arrest affidavit was sealed by the judge until the police are finished with their investigation. So I think they wanted to get her a probable cause affidavit, which the judge signed off on. I think they wanted to get her behind bars. I'll tell you another thing. She was moving.
Right.
3 months after her husband's been murdered, and there's no, movement in the case. Suddenly I'm getting out of Oregon.
Yeah, now that I think of it, that is grounds for a probable cause warrant.
Yeah. She was preparing to move, and that got back to the cops, and they arrested her on Wednesday, and we don't know why. So they do have something that would be used as probable cause that a judge would have to sign off on. But like I said, it's sealed until the police have finished their investigation, which means they have more to do before they can even, present it to the DA and say, this is what we have and this is going to stick. So her next court appearance is Monday, September 17th. And I don't think she's even entered a plea yet. So maybe that's what that's about. Apparently the only thing in court when they arrested her Wednesday was that she confirmed her name, the spelling of her name, and that her attorney was with her, which is a female attorney. So Nancy is 5 years older than Daniel, but looks about 50 years older than him. And just not, she's older and overweight, as if, I have any room to talk, but just sort of looks like she's given up on it. She looks like she could be his mom.
She looks like somebody's grandma.
She looks like everyone's grandma.
Yeah, she looks like everybody's grandma.
But Daniel looks like maybe everyone's dad. So he, it really looks like she could be his parent. And they've been together for 27 years, which is, a good long time for a marriage to last to have it end in, gunfire when you're grown-ass adults in your 60s. It's pretty weird. She did say, she was married to her best friend, and she retells the story of she doesn't remember exactly when he brought up marriage, but she remembers when she wanted to marry him, she was in a bath and, was waiting and thought he was going to join her. And she said, "So are you going to get in or what?" And he's like, "I'll be there in a minute. I'm making hors d'oeuvres."
Okay.
And then she said, "Can you imagine having someone like that in your life and being married to them every day, wonderful home cooked meals? He helps me clean my guns." I mean,
yeah. And when I got so fucking sick of him making goddamn hors d'oeuvres every fucking minute. Sorry.
Right. Exactly. All the fucking hors d'oeuvres. So Nancy doesn't, everyone deals with grief differently, right? And people were like, she's taking this really well. And she went to Facebook 2 days after her husband's murder and says, "For my Facebook friends and family, I have sad news to relate. My husband and best friend, Chef Daniel Brophy, was killed yesterday morning. For those of you who are close to me and feel this deserves a phone call, you're right, but I'm struggling to make sense of everything right now. There's a candlelight vigil at Oregon Culinary Institute tomorrow, Monday, June 4th at 7 p.m. And while I appreciate your loving responses, I'm overwhelmed. Please save phone calls for a few days until I can function and figure out where to hide the gun."
I have a feeling that last part maybe wasn't there.
I added that on.
Yeah.
I added that on. So neighbors were saying, she's taken this really well. One neighbor says, "I feel like it was almost a weight off of her shoulder, like a relief," which is an odd thing to say when everyone says their marriage was, not exactly storybook, but that they were a loving couple that had been together a long time, that there was no dissent in the relationship that anyone, could have noticed from the outside. Her niece is a staunch supporter and saying, my aunt could never have done this. So the Atlanta Journal-Constitutional, is that correct, Mark?
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution rag newspaper printed the beautiful statement from the Culinary Institute, and they said, "To say we are thankful for the love and support everyone has shown is an understatement. There are no words that can truly describe the legacy that Dan Brophy leaves behind. And we know he's looking down and smiling for the kind words, support, love, and togetherness that the community has shown in his honor." Now, is it me, or is that more beautiful than what his wife said?
Yeah.
And
actually, I
it
mean,
really
now
is.
that you mention it, yeah.
And they end it with #ForeverBrophy.
Seems like he was a really well-respected, really well-loved guy.
Exactly. Really, really well-loved and respected. And his wife's post, this is just an observation because, I'm not exactly an official profiler and I'm not exactly a psychologist, but her statement is very her-centered. I'm struggling to make sense of this. I should have called you, but I am posting this message. I have sad news to relate. I appreciate your responses, but I'm overwhelmed.
That's a very interesting observation.
It's very me-centered. It's if someone you love is gone from whatever manner of death, you typically may start with one, I am devastated, I am crushed. Hers is like a periphery friend. It's like, friends, I have sad news to relate.
Right. No, right. But really the gist of it was, leave me alone. And that combined with the fact that her neighbors, or at least the one neighbor is, who we'll hear from shortly, is saying, well, she seems like there's a big weight off her shoulder, and she's just,
It's very interesting. The Oregonian newspaper said that some of the, neighbors were like, we kind of felt like her reaction was odd. She just didn't seem, like she was really all that torn up. And then the clip that producer Mark is talking about is pretty daggone funny. Also, we can thank KOIN. So her neighbor that she shares a fence with, and that Daniel used to share a fence with before he was allegedly murdered by his wife, Don McConnell, is kind of a fun interview because he's just like the average guy on the street, and he says bizarre things. And he catches Nancy over the fence one day and says, "Hey, it seems like maybe it was a disgruntled student had something against Dan, huh?" And Nancy's like, "Oh, I'm not in the loop anymore." And then he explains why. If you could hit clip number 2, producer Mark.
Until that moment, Don McConnell, who shares a fence with Nancy Brophy, only had a high and by relationship with his neighbor.
She's taken it well, and that's what I said. I said maybe that, some people can handle things better than others, and she never showed that she was really upset. But, nobody, I think, dwelled on the subject, hey, what do you think of you just kind of get in and get out type thing.
In the months since her husband, beloved Chef Daniel Brophy, was killed, McDonald says Nancy, who's now in custody, kept busy preparing to move.
I never put that together. I mean, even after she said I'm a suspect, I just thought, oh, yeah, well, they always suspect the opposite spouse,
I think it's a surprise to everybody in the neighborhood.
As an author, she's been writing steamy romance novels filled with murder mysteries. Her neighbors say if there were troubles in the marriage, they never knew it.
Fairly quiet, ordinary people from what I could observe. Cookies at Christmas.
While she may have been tight-lipped with neighbors, Nancy expressed her feelings on Facebook shortly after Daniel's death, calling him her best friend.
I would hope that she's innocent, and that she's just handling it well.
Yeah, that's Don McConnell is a sweet neighbor, but not a real good detective.
That's very dry.
Yeah, I hope she's innocent and just handling it well.
Oh
and
my God.
Everyone handles grief differently. But what we didn't say at the beginning, which I apologize for because I thought it was in the clip, while they're talking over the fence, he says, "So any updates from the police about any suspects?" And she says, "Oh no, I'm out of the loop." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? Why would you be out of the loop?" She said, "Oh, I'm a suspect."
Right.
And that's when I think you crab walk away. Like, yeah. Oh, you know what? That's my phone, right? That's my phone. I got to go.
Yeah, but Don, you only have a cell phone.
It's a new ringtone that I have from it's Android. I have Android. I got to go, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
Bye. You can park your car wherever you want. I don't care. You can park it in my yard. So yeah, Don McConnell knows that she's preparing to move. It's so interesting that he's like, I didn't put that together. I mean, her husband's murdered, and she's a suspect. But I mean, they always suspect the opposite spouse. I mean, and then she's moving, which of course you'd want to do that just a few months after you're. Oh, what? She might be running. Oh no. Well, I hope she's not guilty and she's just taking it really well.
Yeah, the clip is great because you kind of see his eyes drift off as he's saying, I hope she.
Yeah, Don McConnell, God bless him. Like I said, good neighbor, not really good detective. So there are people on Nancy's side, her niece, Heather Kennett, who writes on her Facebook page, "My aunt could never have committed this crime. Dan was the love of her life. She could never have done this. They had a happy marriage with a lot of laughter, a lot of great food. there's nothing Nancy would value more than their life together, and nothing would have caused her to take his life and leave her own life with a giant gaping hole. And you know what? I bet that's why she shot him. Because he called her vagina a giant gaping hole.
Oh, you're bad.
I'm very bad. I'm very, very bad. You know, even his former students are like, I don't know that his wife could do that. I mean, I think it's a former student or someone who has something against him. And I'm thinking, how bad of a grade could you get in foraging for mushrooms? Like, let's say you don't like to be outside and he gave you a D- because you didn't show up that day. I just don't know that that's enough to go back and kill him.
Yeah, it's there's something afoot. There's some bad stuff afoot.
Yeah, and so here's, I don't want to say bad stuff afoot, but Nancy is almost as interesting and quirky as Daniel. So Nancy is a romance writer, which it's not like I expect every romance writer to look like Jackie Collins and have a long lion's mane of hair and a shitload face full of makeup and wearing only leopard print clothing and lying on their chaise lounge writing, romance novels, bodice rippers or something. But producer Mark can speak to the fact that you don't have to look like, a centerfold to be a romance/erotic writer. She actually wrote some erotica, which makes me throw up on my mouth a little bit. So producer Mark was a former employee of LFP.
Oh, I didn't know where you're going with this. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Larry Flint Publications. And please describe the lady that you would see every day at work.
Oh, this was priceless. I worked in the mailroom, and it was a weird place. It was like any other magazine. It was, it was a big open space with lots of cubicles, and it was instead, and back then they didn't have computers, and so this is 1980, 81. They didn't have the computers, and so back then what you would do is you'd storyboard each issue. So you'd have the issue that would come out 3 months later. They storyboarded up on big boards up on the wall, and so instead of Newsweek or like Time magazine or Life magazine with articles and stuff, you see the stuff you see in Hustler up on the wall while you're sitting down talking to your boss about work stuff. Anyway, but the really weird part were the writing. Now, some of the writers were every bit as sleazy looking as you might expect, but most of them were just people coming to work. And this one lady, she was a young lady. She was about my age. I was there in my early 20s. She just graduated from college, and I think she'd been a journalism major, and I guess she couldn't find a job anywhere else. And she came to work every day in this lovely professional business suit. She wore a suit. Very professional. You would have sworn that she was a lawyer or something. And she would go and she would write the letters, the ones that started, I never thought this would happen to me, but...
Dear Hustler.
Yeah, Dear Hustler.
I'm a freshman in a small Midwest town.
Yeah. And get into it, they would get in, pretty graphic stuff. And she was this prim and proper... eating lunch out of a paper bag every day and just kind of sitting at her desk.
Hair in a bun, wearing pearls and glasses.
She wore the glasses and the pearls, and she had kind of long hair. She didn't put it up in a bun, but it was everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, it's interesting. So, no, you don't have to look like Joan Collins.
No, Jackie Collins.
Oh, Joan Collins was the actress, right?
Yeah, they're sisters. But Jackie was the quote-unquote romance writer.
Right.
So Nancy... Crampton Brophy is a writer, sort of, and she has written one book, I guess, was published, and it was like a guide for writers, like how to perfect your story arc, which there are only 874,000 of those books. But she is a self-published author, so she has gone the indie route, as she says on one of her bio informational promo things. And she has, fascinating books. It's called It's So Right, It's So Wrong, It's Right series. And so she has like 4 or 5 different wrong romance / suspense novels. The Wrong Hero, The Wrong Brother, The Wrong Husband.
Oh.
Now, ironically, The Wrong Husband only has 1-star review on Amazon. But it's a 5-star. The other ones have, 14, 15 reviews. It's like, But what I found that was so interesting to me, that I feel like probably, before I read her from her blog, The Wrong Husband feels like a very odd written take on the movie Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts and Patrick, whatever his name is, where she like fakes her own death to get away from her husband because he lines all the cans up facing out in the pantry and hangs his towels a certain way, which, by the way, I hang my towels like that and I really like it, but I wouldn't want to be married to him either. Patrick Bergen. And she flushes her ring down the toilet, but it comes back up, and then he, finds it. And she was an avid swimmer, and she goes out for a swim, and she never comes back, but she, swims away and ends up on an island. And anyway, so this book, The Wrong Husband, a woman fakes her own death from an abusive husband while on a cruise ship. But something happens to the cruise ship and it ends up docked in port. And she wants everyone, I think, to think that she has gone overboard so that her husband can't get to her again. And her husband's like, no, you got to find that body of that woman I didn't really want to be married to, because then I can get some insurance. So everyone's looking for her, and she ends up with, a guy who's been hired to find her a private eye. But then, of course, they fall in love, and then, Fabio's on the cover, and then everyone rips their clothes off. The end. It's really sounds just remarkably bad. It's interesting that she didn't fake her own death, but, allegedly chose to end her husband's death. But she wrote a blog post that is, again, I ain't no psychologist, but this is from August of 2017, and it is entitled, What a Romance Writer Can Tell You About Real Life. So now, life lesson number 1 is fairly interesting to me. If a man in a dark suit comes to your office and says, "Are you blank?" your response should be, "Absolutely not. I'm here to meet with her for an appointment and she stood me up. But you have a good time waiting for her." And then you leave as quickly as possible. Because if you tell him the truth, you will inevitably get another sentence that you will hate, like, "I'm from the IRS," or "You've been served." Or,
really?
"Put your hands behind your back, Nancy."
Yeah.
But it would be hard for her to run from a man in a suit who came to her office, because her office is in her house, and I don't think she could run if you were chasing her with a knife.
But still, it's a little interesting, don't you think?
It's fascinating. Now, this one, I feel like this life lesson number 2 may actually show a psychopathic MO. I mean, life lesson number 2, when to dial 911. If you arrive home to find your house filled with dark smoke, do not stop. Drive to Starbucks and drink a venti cup of coffee or get a pedicure. Any time killer that you can devise, because a smoke-damaged fire is worse than losing everything. In parentheses, trust me. Kids will be kids. When a river of blood gathers at your feet, it doesn't matter that they have been told you're not to be interrupted. It's probably time to investigate. If fire trucks show up and you're still holding the matches, instead of calling 911, call a good friend with bail money and hunt down that lawyer that you refuse to marry.
Okay. This is all, it's actually kind of sociopathic.
That's what I'm saying. I think that it might lend itself to, at first I was like, is she being funny? Because I'll tell you, it's a fine line between I can't tell if she's being funny or if she's, crazy and actually thinks this is the way one should live their life. Everyone else be damned. And, I don't know if she's been through a house fire, but telling you to let everything burn because the smoke damage is worse than just losing it all.
Yeah.
It sounds like she's trying to defraud insurance companies.
To me, what it sounds like, this is what makes it really creepy. It sounds like somebody who thought, oh, this will be funny, but really what creeps out, what seeps out of the edges is how she really feels. It's like, oh, this will be funny, but the smoke damage is worse than, it just, I don't know.
My favorite life lesson from Nancy Crampton Brophy, which no one should ever take life lessons from her, is life lesson number 6, talking things out. I'm a writer because I believe in telling one's story, particularly the painful parts. We've learned to hide our masks so effectively that many times women will tell a tragic tale about losing a parent, a child, or a spouse, and they will smile. Not a happy grin, but the cliched one we all write about in every romance novel, and this is in italics, this is obviously from one of her The Wrong series. Her lips curled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. And now we know why she has 1 star. We write it because we know it, as does our reader. But even if we tell our tale 1,000 times, as long as we smile, we're hiding behind our mask. Step out from behind the curtain, learn to tell a tale of horror without smiling, and then learn to write those things that tear you apart.
I think I'm doing the crab walk again.
I feel like, look, and again, who am I? I've often said for many years, I pray to God, nothing bad happens to me or that I am not accused of anything, because if police came to my home to investigate, and it's gotten much worse as the years gone on, and especially since the podcast, my entire bookshelves are covered with books about yoga and murder and forensics and true crime. So I would be, a prime candidate for like, oh, this one's weird if you, look at my book collection, but it is, something I'm fascinated with, obviously, doing this podcast. But it's her blog is her, in my mind. As a writer, her blog is the real her. It sounds like we may not ever know the real her. It sounds like she, has a mask or had a mask. Who knows if it was a mask she had with her husband or with all of us, and maybe with herself. I don't know. But I feel like your blog is where you can be you. You can be fully 100% you, warts and all. And maybe that's just me. But I feel like this blog says way more about her than I ever wanted to know. But could be a pretty interesting piece of information for the prosecution. It really does bring up sociopathic behavior. I mean, if your house is on fire and you're standing there with the matches, I mean, that's like psychopathic behavior. Perhaps the same sort of behavior that would lend itself to one's mental state to perhaps allegedly shoot your husband at his, place of work that he loves very much, and then act like you're handling it well. So poor Daniel Brophy, 63 is not long enough to live, especially when he was so accomplished and looked like he had another 63 years to live because he loved life. He was exuberant and interested and interesting and curious. And, he sounds like kind of a stellar human being. And I want to close with the beautiful post on Facebook from the Culinary Institute. And it says, Dan Brophy was an outstanding and caring culinary professional and educator. The thousands of students who were fortunate enough to call him their instructor loved and respected him for giving them his utmost best. Our community is still in shock, and we're grieving the loss of an amazing human being, friend, and chef. We will continue to honor his memory by doing what we do best, and that's educating future culinary professionals to carry the baton and make Dan proud. And more cowbell.
If you like what you hear, rate and review, please. And if you got a tip, call us, 832-TIPSTER, 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.